Hey team, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I'm excited to get to learn from Eric Mittenthal. He is in charge of strategy, the Chief Strategy Officer for the Meat Institute. Some of you will remember we had Juliana Potts several months ago on the show, back before Christmas in 2025, and we're going to continue learning more about the meat industry, the Meat Institute. We might even get into some really sexy stuff today called continuous improvement, which I know you guys will be dying to get your hands on, and you should. And Eric will explain why here in just a little bit. So, Eric, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. You can same opening question everybody does. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
For me, it's really gets back to what's our why as an association. We're here to feed people and feed them nutrient dense protein that we know Americans love. And so how do we create an environment for businesses to feed people and make them healthy and make them happy?
I love it. Well, meat always makes me happy, so I'm never not happy about when we get to sit down and talk about it. And today we'll probably get to talk about a little bit of policy too. I would imagine there's some interesting things going on up there in Washington D.C. these days. So hopefully we get to dive into that a little bit. But first, tell us a little bit about you. What does a chief strategy officer do at the Meat Institute? What's the Meat Institute, and who's Eric Mittenthal?
Yeah, we can start with the Meat Institute. So we're a trade association for meat companies representing 95% of the red meat that's produced in the US. That's beef, pork, lamb, veal, bison, and the majority of the poultry as well, so chicken and turkey. And we work really closely with those companies around the country, many of which are well-known consumer brands, many more of which are not. They're small companies, under 200 employees, family businesses that are feeding their local communities. And we support them in Washington, D.C., both with our regulatory agencies like USDA and FDA, working with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. We do a great deal of education for the industry, helping to bring companies up to speed on food safety, animal welfare, worker safety. And then we help support their continuous improvement, which is what my role is all about. Our strategy is focused on how do we earn greater consumer trust in animal protein, and what are the expectations that people have for our industry, and how do we meet those expectations. So my job is to identify those things and make sure that we are on a pathway as an industry to meet those expectations and earn consumer trust.
Wow. That's a really important job. I don't think, for the most part, we don't sit around and think about these kinds of things, like who doesn't trust animal protein. And as you say that, immediately my mind goes like, is there a lack of trust due to animal activism and things like that? Is that the main driver, or what is like, in what ways do we need to drive trust in animal protein?
Well, first of all, trust in pretty much everything in our society these days is down. And so you think about just institutional trust in our government, in health agencies, in the media. And so we are just in a environment as a whole where people don't necessarily trust what they're being told. The good news is, from a broader food perspective, people generally trust their food and food companies. And similarly, there's a lot of trust in meat. We've been producing meat safely and nutritiously for hundreds of years, and that's improved over time as well. And so we know that our levels of trust as an industry are higher than the average trust that people have in societal, big societal elements these days. But at the same time, right now in particular, people are bombarded with all kinds of information about their food. And it's coming from social media sources, it's coming from activists, it's coming from health influencers, it's coming from our government. And so it's really hard to navigate what's true and what's not, and what can I trust. And we want to be able to be a source of trust and proof. And I think that's the number one thing is, okay, what are you doing as an industry? We can talk about that, but then we have to be able to prove it. And so our role and my job is, how do we prove what we're doing as an industry and what we're saying so that people trust us, so that when they have questions about whether their food is safe, whether it's nutritious, whether we're treating animals the right way, we have proof behind that, and people can trust and believe in it.
Yeah, yeah. So we definitely are in a trust recession, globally and particularly like here in America. And we live in this world now. It's really weird. I mean, we don't even know if the videos and the pictures and the images that we're watching, whether they can be real or not, because anything can be manufactured, right? And I know there's certain, I don't even want to get into that too much, but it's like, I mean, you have to pause and think. I mean, if I just encourage people to be intentional, be deliberate for yourself and for others before you get spun up about a social media post. You need to pause and think about, is this just here? Is this just propaganda to antagonize someone like me to begin with? Because the more you spin some of these things up and get fired up about it, then the more you just play into the hands of people who would like you to do that kind of thing. And yeah, there's a lot that could be said about that, but we don't really know whether some of the information is actually factual. So so as a result, I think we have this trust recession. How do we, like, if we're producers, if we're corn growers, if we're people working in the industry, we're an industry advocate, we're doing things like we do with the Intentional Ag Leader podcast. Eric, how do we, from your perspective, how do we differentiate signal from noise?
Well, I think again, it gets back to having the proof. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to do is bring together partners across animal agriculture, but across all of agriculture as a whole. Because for people who are buying meat on their store shelves, most people aren't going to distinguish exactly where that came from or who's responsible for different portions of how the animal's raised, or how it's processed in a specific place. They want to know that the system is working in their favor and providing information that's accurate and trustworthy. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting all those dots for them so people don't have to do the work. We want to make it easy and provide the information, make it accessible. And when people have the questions, they can find it in easily accessible places.
Yeah, you bet. I think it's important to have, like, just to make it easy to get to some of the information so that we can. I mean, we have conversations like this within our house all the time. I talk about this on the show quite frequently. Where I mean, I come from the agriculture industry. I've got a degree in agricultural education. I've spent my entire career working in it, serving it in some way, shape, or form. We happen to do this from in the human capital arena. So we're doing people training and skill development and culture building and things like that. So I'm around it, right? But my family is not. My family is actually Italian. My wife lived in Italy till she was 10. My mother-in-law lives with us. She is Italian. We have a very different food experience. We're a very Mediterranean diet here in this house for the most part. And but it's very picky. Like, oh, we can't get that chicken, right? Because that chicken has antibiotics in it. And I'm like, it says right on the package that there's no antibiotics in this chicken, right? Yet there could be, because it's not organic. So we're spending 6 times the amount on chicken thighs than we would actually potentially have to. Like, how do I play this game?
Yeah.
Give me some strategy.
Yeah, and it's part of just the amount of information we're all bombarded with. I mean, just on a package of food, you see so much information and have to make a decision about what aligns with your values. I think the thing that the industry tries to provide are choices for you and your family. Maybe you feel like organic it fits the values that you have and is really important, and you're willing to pay more for that. I personally don't feel the need to buy organic. I don't think it's necessary. I know what goes into producing non-organic products, and for my family, we buy traditional products, and I'm comfortable in that, and I'm not going to disparage your choice or anybody else's choices. We try to provide the range of options for all different consumers. Some people are looking for things that are more affordable, and others are willing to pay more for certain things, and it's all available. And it really comes down to what's most important to you and your family. It's all safe, it's all nutritious, it's all wholesome, it's all produced caring for the animals. It's just a matter of what level do you need for your family, and you can make that choice. And we want to make sure those are available and affordable for people at the store.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. Okay, it's a challenge for a lot of people, a lot of families like ours. You have different beliefs, different levels of caring, and I care more about saving a few shekels on a package of chicken thighs. More than I care about whether it's organic or not. I also care about keeping my wife happy. right? And so, you kind of walk that fine line. But I think, man, we're just a little bit of a snapshot of what goes on across most of middle America, right?
Yeah, and it's all over the place, really. People's what their values are and what they're interested in terms of food purchases varies quite a bit. I mean, there are so many different consumer segments and what people are looking for. And so again, it gets back to choices, and even just the chicken thighs. For you and your family, you may love the taste of chicken thighs. Other families might prefer a chicken breast or a steak.
Right.
And
Yep.
so those are all available. And so our
Yep.
role is to make sure that those are going to be on the shelves for people to make
Right.
those choices.
Man, well, and thank God for choice. We live in this amazing society. You think about the problems. If we were to rewind just 100 years ago and go back to the 1920s, you have real scarcity issues. You have real, like, nobody's going to the grocery store and getting a 12-pack of chicken thighs, right? Like, that takes a few chickens to get there, right? You're lucky to get a whole chicken, right? You're grateful to have, what was the FDR's thing, a chicken in the 30s, right? It was a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. That was the New Deal. And so, we know I can go to the grocery store, any of them, within 15 minutes of my house right now, and buy packs of chicken thighs and chicken breasts and chicken wings, just wings, right? And then whatever cut of meat. And then I can, if I want to actually go to the butcher shop, we have a nice one here in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, called Quinn's. And I go over to O'Quinn's because these guys know their meat, And my favorite class that I ever took in college, Eric, was livestock and carcass evaluation. And it was a Tuesday, Thursday class. And so Tuesday, this is at the University of Minnesota, we would see the animal walking pen. And every 2 weeks was a different animal category. And so, 1 week it was beef, the next week it was, it was pigs, and the next week, whatever. We went through everything. And so we would have to, make our best guess as to, and by the way, I'm a non-traditional ag kid. I grew up in Dairyland in, central Minnesota, but we didn't raise livestock. We didn't raise crops on my farm. And so I didn't have all the livestock judging experience. This is a class that I took as an elective to get my animal science credits. And so, but on Tuesday we would see the animal walking in the pen, and we would make our best guess on how big the loin eye or the rib eye was going to be, and how what the back fat was going to be, and like we'd have to rank the animals and everything, and then we turn in our scorecard, and then based on how we got our scores were, our grade was based on how well we did at judging the animal compared to what the professor thought and what the actual results were. So on Thursday class, we would see it hanging carcass in the classroom, and then we actually get to go measure and see how we did and find out how we did in the class. So anyway, my favorite class that I ever took was that, and I forget a little bit where I was going with that. You might have to bring me back on. I'm reliving a college memory as we see. But I go down to O'Quinn's, to the barbershop here in Pittsburgh, and it's fun to go talk to these guys because they know their meat.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you started off in a much even more advanced place than I did, just in terms of understanding and experience in the meat world. I had no agriculture background, no meat background whatsoever growing up. I was a city kid. I would have been just one of those people who thinks food comes from the grocery store and, no idea how it's grown, how it's raised. And
Yeah.
I managed to have a communications background. I was working as a TV reporter in a variety of places, and eventually I have a health background too. So I got myself into the food industry and started learning how the food industry functions and how food is produced, and eventually made my way over to the meat industry. And it's so interesting within the meat industry that people in the industry, you're lifers. It once you get into the industry, you don't leave. I've been here for 14 years now, again starting with really no knowledge of how meat was actually produced. And so I've learned a ton, and I think we want to be able to provide that transparency to everybody, and share how it's done, why it's done the way it's done. Not everybody's going to always be able to be on a farm all the time or be inside one of our processing facilities. We maintain really strict biosecurity and want to make sure that our food is safe, and that's going to be a priority. But we can be more transparent, and we can make sure that we're telling that story and providing those proof points. And so that's what we're focused on is trying to bring people in to help understand why the industry does what we do, how we're feeding people, and providing value to society.
What am I as you talk about all that? I mean, it's really cool how you came into the industry and how how you found your way here, so to speak. And it's catchy, isn't it? Right? Like my dad was a wholesale fishing bait dealer, so we had a leech farm. Okay, like we trapped and sold thousands and thousands of pounds of leeches every summer. That was what I grew up doing. That was the family business. But I got into an ag class when I was in high school. So when I got into high school, I got into a poultry judging class, and then from my ag teacher, and then that got me into FFA, and then the FFA recruited me into the agriculture industry, and it's just like it's stuck. Even though I came, there's just something about it. Even though I came from the non-traditional arena, so it's cool to hear other people that came from that. And what I'm curious about is, what was it about, like, once you started getting into it, like, what convinced you that the meat is safe, that the industry is safe, that it's all doing, because it's like that's not the mainstream narrative. And I'm guessing if you were in media, you probably were hearing other stories before you came into that. So I'm curious, like, what was Eric's story? Like, what made you like grasp onto it?
Yeah, I work with members of our industry every single day, and I see firsthand the passion that they bring to the table and the detail with which they work. And you're correct in that, again, getting back to, people are bombarded with all kinds of information about their food and claims. You hear things, but when you see the passion and the detail that is occurring within the industry, and the data that bears out how much we've improved over the years. Take ground beef, for example. Back in the early 90s, we had a ground beef E. coli outbreak that killed people. And it was tragic and heartbreaking and a wake up call for the industry. And the industry acted on that. And today, you rarely hear about anybody getting sick from ground beef. If it happens, it's a pretty big deal. It's a very big deal when we make anybody sick. And we really strive to make sure that we are doing everything we can to eliminate those pathogens in our products. And with raw products from an animal source, that there's always a risk. And even from non-animal sources, you see it in produce as well. There's always a risk, but we know the things that we need to do to drastically reduce those risks, and they're being done. And you see it happening in our facilities. You see it happening at the leadership level, where our CEOs are spending time talking about the things that are necessary to advance food safety, and seeing it go from the top down and being implemented is very powerful. And I think we've really made great strides. There's always opportunities to continue to improve, kind of getting back to that continuous improvement idea.
Yeah.
But we know we're doing very well, and we know we can continue to get better and make it even safer.
Yeah. Incredible. Leads me to my next question, which is going to be tied to continuous improvement. But I want to start with another term first, which is cognitive dissonance, because it's one of my favorite terms, right? Because for those that don't understand the term or don't know it, right? When we're expressing cognitive dissonance, so to speak, this is the way I like to explain it, is when I'm expressing cognitive dissonance, it means that I have already decided, like, I've made up my mind, and I'm not accepting new information about that thing right now. Okay, so I've made up my mind. It is what it is. This is what I believe. The evidence that I've read, whether factual or not, doesn't matter. This is what I've chosen to believe. And so when somebody's expressing cognitive dissonance, if I try to pepper them with more information that's contrary to what they currently believe, they don't change their mind. They just dig their heels in. This is what you see in the news media all day long, every single day, right? You have one side that believes one thing and another side that believes another thing, and it's cognitive dissonance acted out in real time. More evidence, no matter how factual or no matter how compelling, does not change people's minds, right? And so how do you deal with, because I think continuous improvement picks away at that over time. But from a strategy standpoint, I mean, how do you guys deal with that? How does the meat industry deal with that? Because it's like, man, if the food babe said this is like it's bad, then it's bad, and then that becomes it, right? Or if RFK says this is the case, then and I'm in Maha, then it becomes gospel in many cases. Like how do we work with that?
Yeah, I mean, I see cognitive dissonance as a moment in time phenomenon, and it really comes down to how are we having a conversation with people and providing information to a range of sources who they trust. And people aren't necessarily going to trust an industry voice. We certainly have bias and motivation to say positive things about our industry. That's our role as an association. But how do we prove to as many people as we can about what we're doing? And so one of the things that we've started within the Meat Institute, which is really unique for an association, is that we've been collecting data from our members for the last several years to measure what we're doing on issues that are most impactful for consumer trust and where the
Okay.
questions arise from. So, animal welfare, food safety, environmental impact, nutrition and food security, and worker safety and labor. And we have for the last 5 years, put up together measures of what is a best practice in those areas. And there's several in each area, and then how do we capture what the industry is doing so that when people have the questions about, I don't believe you can produce food safety, I don't believe that that you're treating workers well, here's what we actually do, and here's the data to back it up, and here's how that has evolved over several years. And we have several targets that we have set for the industry to measure our improvement, reducing our worker injury rates, ensuring that our members are passing animal handling and transportation audits,
Mhm.
making sure that we're doing the best we can with companies to and improve our impacts on the climate. And so we can show the progress that we've made in all of those areas through data and tell the story. And so it's not a moment in time thing for us. It's very much a long term effort. We started this back in
Yeah.
It actually started back in 2018. But the measurement part really started back in 2021. So we're 5 years in, and we viewed this as a 2030 approach. And so we've got 5 years to go. And so we're continuing to evolve what we do and make sure that we're aligning with what we're hearing in the world. The Maha movement is another moment in time that has evolved the perceptions of the food industry and the products that we produce. And we're very fortunately in a moment of really powerful nutrition. The dietary guidelines have
Mhm.
shifted, and more recognition is being given to the power of protein and the value of nutrient dense animal protein products in the diet. And so we want to have the proof points of the science behind that. And so it's constantly looking at what are people asking questions about, what kind of information do people want to hear from the industry, and providing the proof points behind that based on data and what the industry's actually doing.
Meat is kind of having a moment right now with the whole flipping of the food pyramid. And I think I don't remember if it was Juliana that I had on when we talked about this, or if it was another guest. You don't really understand the level of impact that food pyramid has on the the usage, I guess, that we're going to, the demand that will be placed on food production systems, because it actually does change food policy and the way things get sold into schools and other, public, military, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it really impacts a lot of things.
Yeah, there's a policy lever that has some impact, particularly school meals, military, public purchasing has to be done in line with the dietary guidelines. I think one of the criticisms that have been out there about the guidelines historically is that, well, nobody follows them. And that's true. I mean, nobody follows the dietary guidelines to a T. But I think the messages from the dietary guidelines do impact conventional wisdom. You think back to some of the early versions of dietary guidelines around eggs and cholesterol, and people were told, well, eggs are bad for you. And then as the science improved, eggs are super nutritious and one of the most nutritious foods you can eat. And the cholesterol from eggs doesn't necessarily impact human health in a negative way. And I think we're seeing a similar approach towards meat, where there's recognition that Meat is nutrient dense and it offers all the nutrients that we need, but they're also nutrients that are very bioavailable, meaning our bodies are able to absorb them better from animal protein than from other sources. And in fact, the best combination is animal protein and plants together. I mean, that is the ultimate absorption pathway for nutrients. And I think there's just a greater recognition of that. And even if people aren't going to follow the dietary guidelines to a T, I think that understanding that there is strong science that shows that animal protein is good for us and has really strong nutrient density is part of what's driving this moment that meat's having. And we want to continue to lean into that and add to the scientific literature so that as people are, as the debate continues and potentially would swing back in another direction, that the scientific basis for what we're seeing right now is really strong.
How important is it that during this administration that we stay on offense?
Well, it's important that we have proof, and so I don't see it necessarily as an administration thing. I think it's the world and people who are purchasing products are believing in the nutrient density that meat offers, and we want to continue to support that and make them confident that yes, these products do align with my values, that I'm getting really good nutrition from that, and here's the scientific basis to back that up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, my favorite new product lately has been I found it one time and I can't. They're gone from the grocery store. I got to look them up online. It was potato chips cooked in beef tallow. 3 ingredients: potatoes, beef tallow, and salt. And it was we're like a 3-ingredient household. So if it's got more than 3 ingredients, then it has to be something that you would make and put these ingredients together. Otherwise, we just don't buy it. And so, and I'm very health conscious and I pay attention. I've had a lot of gut issues in the last 4 or 5 years, and so I pay attention to how things make me feel, and things that are cooked in a lot of seed oils and things like this. I don't feel good, so hey, I'm not here. If you want to eat it, it doesn't bother you, fine, go ahead and eat it. It doesn't work for me. And so I was super jacked when I saw a bag of potato chips that were cooked in beef tallow. And so I was sitting on the front porch. I was having a couple of them. My son comes up and he grabs one. He's like, "This tastes like meat." And I was like, "Yes, this is like meat and potatoes in one little sack right here. Like, we're in heaven."
Yeah, beef tallow is having its moment, and tallow is one of
Man.
those things where again, the nutrient density it offers and you can put it with potato chips and French fries. Now, those are still potato chips and French fries, and so we shouldn't lose sight of that. But
Yeah,
it is something that people really love. It gives you that meaty flavor, and so yeah, never will turn down the meaty flavor.
man, never. So good. All right. We sort of danced around this a little bit. I do want to just touch. I want to come back to it quick as we start to bring things in for a landing here today, Eric. What is continuous improvement, and like how? You certainly touched on why it's important, because we're trying to get better, have more proof. We're trying to continuously help organizations improve in the way that they have documentation, that they're doing proper safety training, they're keeping their people safe, they're keeping the meat safe, they're keeping the industry, the animals are staying safe. All those things, those are important. Anything else that we missed on that we should cover? Because from when I think about intentional leadership, I think about that as a really important aspect, and I think we should.
Yeah, I think for us, we've identified the best practices in the industry that go beyond the compliance topics. And so there are certain regulations that all of our companies have to comply with that ensure that our food is safe, that ensure that we're handling animals properly, and ensure that we're treating workers safely. But there's always more advanced things that we can do to really move the needle in a positive direction there. And so we've identified the things that the best of the best are doing in the industry. And how do we help support wider adoption of those best of the best practices across the whole industry and measure that? And so that really for us is what continuous improvement is about. We know that what we're doing today is great. There's never perfection. And I think we can never live in a mindset of we've got it all nailed down and we're doing everything perfectly. We're human and humans are imperfect. And so there's always going to be opportunities to do better. And so we've identified the things that we can strive towards, and we are measuring our progress towards those things. So in an ideal world, we reach those goals by 2030, but then at the same time, there's still better out there. There's always better out there. And so we'll continue to identify those things and continue to improve them. And in an ideal world, nobody ever gets sick from our products. All the animals we handle are having, an ideal animal handling experience, where all of the workers never have an injury in the industry. Injuries happen across all industries. We need to make sure we're taking every step we possibly can to reduce those and make them as rare as possible. And that's what continuous improvement is about.
What a great way to bring this conversation in for a landing. Eric, it has been a pleasure getting to know you this morning. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.